Hello, family. Welcome back to another episode of Elevated Perspectives Podcast. I'm Courtney. If you are not already liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, all of the things, go ahead and do that now. Okay. In this episode, I sat down with Karina Henry, or at Karina Worldwide, to discuss how exactly she acquired so many international husbands, her teaching experience in China, what it was like to work abroad before the whole remote work wave took over. Being a Black female solo traveler, the trips that she hosts in Africa, y'all, there's so much good conversation in this episode. I cannot wait for you to dive in. So make sure that you are liking, following the podcast. Go follow Karina. I promise you will not forget it. And without further ado, enjoy the episode. I have so much empathy for people that come to a country where they don't speak the language and they just have to start a whole new life.
Right.
When we were signing up Xavier for school in Guadalajara, even though the school was like bilingual, like all the forms are in Spanish. The teachers primarily speak Spanish. Everyone's talking in Spanish. And I thought back to like the kids that were in like ESOL when I was in elementary school and like their parents coming in and them having to like translate.
Everything's in English.
And I just had this moment of empathy where I'm like, wow, like imagine being somewhere where you can't like advocate for your child the way you want to.
Right.
Where you just don't know what's going on, at least entirely. Like, it puts a whole different, it's a lot of perspective. And I guess that's part of the point, is travel and cultural immersion and the perspective that it gives you. Which, again, is why I appreciate your platform so much, because it's about these stories and these people and these learnings.
Right.
Past, palm trees and beaches and things like that.
And it wasn't always that way. There was a time where I was focused on, like, I have to get the best photo. I would plan my trips around getting the Instagram-worthy shots. And then once I moved to China, I just realized I'm more focused on the quality of my experience and the interactions than I am on the quality of the photo or the video. So a lot of times, not a lot of times, now I plan my experiences and then I just base my content around it, as opposed to planning the content and then saying, okay, well then I can do this so that I can post this on Instagram.
Yeah.
So I know we live in a world, we don't live in Instagram, but Instagram has made it difficult for people to be their authentic selves, especially if you're like a creative, right? Because people push out the pretty pictures. But I love the fact that I've built this, I don't want to say brand, but I've had this experience where I don't need to focus on the perfect shot, because people get it now. They're like, okay, she's over here with her struggle Spanish with the taxi driver, and he's taking her in the hood somewhere to eat the best food she's ever had, and he's showing her pictures and videos of jaguars eating his neighbor's dog, and I'm like, yeah, that happened. And then after he showed me, I ended up staying at a hotel that was less than 10 minutes from where he showed me the jaguar killed the dog, and I'm like,
And you slept well?
Of course
knowing
not.
There were jaguars prowling?
It sounds, I don't want to say it sounds good, right? But it sounds adventurous. Like, I'm going to go outside and there's going to be a jaguar just like walking through the forest. And I'm going to be the one to capture that moment. And then you go outside and it's pitch black and you're like, oh, he can see me. I can't even see him. So, no.
No.
But in that moment, it was cool.
Good on that. Maybe through glass. If one walked down the street right now, I think that would be real cool. I would have to go inside. But I think that'd be real cool.
Right. Or I just look around and see, like, are there other people who can't run as fast as I can?
How safe am I on a scale of 1 to 10? What's the competition for survival here?
Right.
No, I get that.
That sounds so bad because I immediately thought about old ladies. And I'm like, God dang, I didn't even said this. And there's going to be an old lady in a walker and I'm going to be like, you lived a good life, ma'am.
I thought, I'm like, who could I trip? And then I'm like, oh, no.
Ma'am, you lived a good life.
I know. Like,
right.
Okay, so you're out here authentically traveling, planning content just around what's happening as opposed to missing out on moments and experiences, trying to schedule in what you want to do around getting the pretty pictures,
right?
Which I love. We missed a lot in the beginning of our adventure because we were like, I get the shot, the photo shoot, we gotta go here, we gotta go there. And the kids are like, they're like throwing crackers and snacks and we're not really interacting.
Right.
I like to think we're moving more into the sphere of like, let's go enjoy life. The gram will get what the gram gets.
Right.
The gram will get what the gram gets.
And they will love it.
And they will, there's always people out there. We've gotten lots of critiques. Some people are like, but where are you staying? We want to see more of this, more of that. And other people are like, stop painting a pretty picture. We want to see how hard it is. And other people want this, and other people want that.
Right.
And everyone's just going to get what they get and they'll live.
Right. Exactly, because it gets to a point where it's just overwhelming. And I get it, as creators, we want to show different sides of our travel experiences. But I am past the whole, like, this is the pretty picture. It's cool. And, some days I put on a sexy bathing suit and I suck my stomach all the way in and I'm like, you see this beach, but really look at me. But for the most part, I'm like, I want people to get more out of my content. There are so many people who want to move away from what they've seen on Instagram, right? And they want to journey outside or off the beaten path. And I love that as pioneers, we're spearheading that movement where people are inspired to leave the touristy areas with discernment. Don't just be jumping out there talking about with discernment and research. But going out there and really connecting with locals. Because I think the best experiences I've ever had have just been off the grid with me ripping up my itinerary and saying, you know what? Today's the day I'm just going to just go. And I've had the best experiences. I've had the best food. And itineraries are important. That's the Virgo in me.
Yeah.
I'm very organized. But now I'm more interested in those authentic experiences. And I love that I get the opportunity to share it. And there are times, like you said, with the critics where they're just like, well, I didn't like the video quality. I actually had someone who told me that. They said,
you want to buy me a camera?
And they were just like, you could fly me with you and I could be your photographer because the quality in your videos. And I'm like, you know what? That's cool. And that's all I said.
Yeah.
Because that was the end of the conversation. Like, that's your opinion. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that I've been able to grow in this space doing what I love. But even if I didn't, I still love the fact that I get to travel and have these experiences. And
I think the authenticity pulls through.
Right.
That's definitely part of the draw.
Right.
Which is cool. It's easier to do something if you get to show up as yourself.
Right.
Which I love. Okay, so let's go backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a world traveler, you're an explorer, you are an adventurous foodie. I have questions, comments, thoughts, and maybe like half a concern. I'll probably put to myself. Adventurous foodie. But where did this start? So as far as travel goes, like, did you just grow up traveling? Did you pick up your passport one day and just say, goodbye, USA, and dip out? Like, what does your journey to becoming who you are today look like as far as travel goes?
I am actually a late bloomer to the travel world. I didn't start traveling until around 2015. So I grew up in a household where my dad was very spontaneous. So we would be at the gas station in Brooklyn and he's like, let's go to Maryland. It was always like 3 to 5 hours. I remember getting excited if my parents were like, I'm going to the grocery store and I'm putting on my shoes like, I want to go too. That's a good experience. So in 2015, my dad's Jamaican and he moved to the States when he was around 18 years old and he had never been back to Jamaica since that time. And I decided like, I want to meet my paternal family that's still in Jamaica. So in 2015, I got my passport, and then my little sister, who was probably 14 at the time, I got her passport too. And really it was because I was not going there by myself. I'm like, they're my family, but I don't really know y'all like that. I mean, we told each other on Facebook, but that experience kind of just skyrocketed into me, like wanting to experience more. And so my first solo trip was to San Francisco, and I put off that trip so much that when I called to push back my flight, like for the 4th time, the lady was like, listen, this is the last time. I know we said this was a refundable ticket, but you can't keep pushing it back. We keep giving you vouchers. And I'm like, well, I thought I read the fine print. I think I can. But my family had all of these concerns, of course. So my grandma she went through this whole phase of saying, that's how I know I don't have good parents, because they should never let their child. Meanwhile, she had her hand in raising me. So I'm like, well, if they're bad parents, what does that make you?
Pot and kettle, baby.
Right. But I'm glad I went. And then I ended up staying in San Fran for 4 days. And then from there, 4 months later, I talked my job into letting me stay in Thailand for 2.5 months while I was working remotely. Slight flex, because this was before the pandemic. So it was 2018.
When you say talk them into it,
so
I want just a little more for anyone that needs to talk their job into letting them work remotely in Thailand.
Girl. So the crazy thing is I worked in a corporate role, like a corporate setting where outside of I'm really sick and I'm about to have this baby, you could not work from home. Right. It was crazy. Because they're always just like, we need you in. But I actually submitted a 10-page proposal. I listed logistically everything, like how I'm going to be able to do this, where I'll be, my hours, just everything. And so the CEO, they actually flew the CEO in to have a meeting with me. And he's like, okay, this all looks good. But the bottom line is this. If we said no, what would happen? And I said, if you said yes, I would do my job and continue to do it well. And then I would come back. If you said no, I'm still going to go, but I'm probably not going to come back. And a week later, they approved me. But it also shows like it works in your favor to be an asset and work your butt off and do what you're supposed to do at work.
It's true. Because if you were just replaceable,
they would have said, okay, girl.
Yeah, bye. 10-page proposal. There's the Virgo.
So after that, my job, I came back. And then 2 months later, I was living in China. And to this day, my old supervisor says, I love that you had that experience, but I regret that we approved you going, which is a little shady, but I regret you going because you didn't even give us like 90 days. You were gone. And that was it. And ever since then, it's just been like, it's just been traveling.
So in China, you were teaching. So you get back from Thailand, you're like, I need more. Right. You come back 2 weeks notice, and then you go teach in China. That's how you were able to get over there with like visas and.
Oh, you want the rundown?
Yeah.
Let me give you the rundown.
The people want to know.
The people,
because the thing is, you know what I mean. There's so many people. I feel like there's a lot of like short form content and text on like Instagram and TikTok, and there's like voiceovers. We're so limited to that, like 60 seconds to 3 minutes. But like the people want to know.
Okay, people.
By the people, I mean me. I'm the people in this situation.
I'm like, Karina, back up. Okay. So while I was in Thailand, I actually ran into this little white girl. You can edit that out if I'm not supposed to say white girl. A little young lady.
She knows she's white.
Right, she does. She knows she's white. She was 22 years old, and I met her while we were on a long-tail boat going to like the 7 different islands in Koh Lanta. And we were just having a conversation, and I'm like, well, what are you doing out here by yourself? And she's like, I teach English. And I'm like, oh, as a teacher? And I automatically start thinking like, you're an English teacher in the States. And you're doing all of this? Because I know what they make in the States. Maybe there's a sugar daddy and stuff, but I don't judge.
We don't judge.
I don't judge. So she started telling me about, she was working in Vietnam as an English teacher. And of course, when people first start telling you things like this, you automatically assume it's because you went to school for this.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. My background is in English, but not education. And she's like, girl.
Even that you speak the language. But that you have to be bilingual.
So that's another thing.
Chinese or Vietnamese in order to teach English in these places.
And she's like, girl, my background is in mathematics. And I don't teach math. I barely can count outside of what did she say? Outside of my 10 fingers. And I'm like, well, sign me up. She gave me the information. And then, of course, you needed a TEFL certificate. Mm-hmm. So teach English as a foreign language. And I started, when I got back to the hotel, I'm already researching and everything's coming up. It's $2,000. It's $500. Well, I had a good job, but it wasn't great. Mm-hmm. So I'm automatically thankfully I took her number and I reached out to her on WhatsApp and I said, hey, I know you said that I had to get a TEFL certificate, but it's super expensive. What did you do? She sent me a Groupon for a TEFL certificate that was $29 from Full Circle, and it's still on there.
Oh my God.
I went through there and I was nervous because I'm like, that sounds like a scam. I'm about to go to another country and start off my scamming lifestyle with this fake fraudulent certificate. But she painted this picture of being an English teacher in another country. Well, scam me up. I'm ready.
Scam me up.
So the description said that you were supposed to finish the program itself pays in like 2 months. I finished it in 4 days. Like I even played sick because I was like, oh, I want to finish this.
Yeah.
So I finished it. I was still nervous when I started like getting interviews. So I started like submitting my resume, and I'm nervous because here I am with this fraudulent certificate from Groupon. And then I realized a lot of these schools, they just cared that I was a native English speaker and that I had a bachelor's degree, and that was it. Mm. And I came back, and when I came back to the States, I told my boss, I really appreciate this opportunity, but I'm about to be back in Asia soon. And she's like, ha, 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 ha. And I'm like, girl, I'm not laughing with you. I'm serious. And they already knew that I was going back to China, but I didn't put I think I gave them like a 3 weeks notice because I needed a week for myself.
Yeah.
And then I came back in May. No, I came back in June. And then in September, I was in Suzhou, China, teaching English. Yeah, and I think that's also where the whole thing came in with me wanting to focus more on like cultural immersion. Because before then, it was really like, I'm just having fun. I'm young. So I'm like, I'm drinking. I'm showing people like, this is the best like clubbing spot. And I also don't know if like China just hit me in the forehead. Like, girl, you getting old. Sit down somewhere. And so I sat down, and then I realized like, there's more benefit to you being in a country when you take the initiative to build connections and make friends with a lot of like locals. So that was the first time in my life where I stopped like seeking out expats.
Right.
I was more interested in like, even there was a time where this guy, we were dating or whatever, and he's like, I can introduce you to my friends. And I'm like, why? Why do I need to? I don't need. And he's like, no, because, I think we need to build a community. And I think it is important to have a support system when you're living abroad. It's really important. I think it's important to build like a sense of community. But for a lot of expats, and this is just my personal opinion, I think a lot of expats come and they focus their community around people just being from the same country. Like,
they put themselves in a bubble. I'm glad you make this point though, because first of all, I want to get into the conversation. What is an expat?
Oh.
What does that mean? And why is it different from an immigrant?
Did you watch my TikTok video?
You know what? We've been having this conversation a lot. I actually did. I don't know.
Oh, girl.
Did I?
No, that's good because I'm about to give you a rundown. No, you shouldn't have because it's going to be fresh.
What does this even mean? I've been having this conversation with Justin a lot, and I'm analytical, right? So I've got like a little technical difference here and there, but the way that people throw around the word expat, the way that people use the word expat, versus how they never call themselves immigrants, but there's a select group of people that are always immigrants and never expats.
Who are doing the same things that we're doing.
Same thing.
Okay.
Oftentimes more legally than us.
So, tag me in. Okay, I'm tagged in. All right. So, when I lived in China, that was the only word I knew. Like, of course, we know about immigrants, but no one ever called themselves like an immigrant. It was just like, I'm an expat. I'm an expat from such and such. So I always just ran with that word. It wasn't until I moved to Mexico that I began to get like a greater understanding of not only what the difference is between being an expat and an immigrant, but how offensive it can be to just always refer to yourself as an expat. There are people who have been here for 10 years and they're like, I'm an expat. I'm like, no, baby, you're not. And it's so sad to me that when people go to the United States and to Canada, off the bat, I rarely hear people from other countries who are in the States, they refer to themselves as expats. Never. It's always like, immigrants, right? So why is it that we have the luxury to go to other countries, do the same thing, take from their resources, and then we get to say, oh, expats. And I really think expats, it's just, to a lot of people, it's more like a glamorized like term, because a lot of people don't want to be called immigrants. And I'm like, but that's what you're doing. Right. An expat, I get it if you're coming to a country and you're just like, this is not home for me. I might be here for a year or two or a few months. Just to kind of like figure things out, then yes, you would be an expat. But if you've been here and you're here permanently, by definition, you ma'am, you sir, are an immigrant.
We're talking to you.
Right, to you, to you.
You know who you are.
To you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think one of the things that popped up, do you remember, I want to say, there in New York some time ago, there's a newspaper article about a woman that was found dead in a cocaine apartment. In a cocaine apartment.
Right.
In a cocaine apartment. And I remember the flare up. And I think that's one of the first times I've really been just so conscious around the differences in language, because it's just an apartment.
Right.
And maybe there was some cocaine. Meanwhile, other people are in and out of crack houses and bandos.
And they're living a party lifestyle. Right. That's a recreational thing. It's a Saturday party, and it's like, okay.
So I think, and obviously different subject matter, but it circles back to that thing where it's like, if you just want like a cool, trendy title to like set yourself apart because you're in a different country where your dollar stretches longer, and it's the status thing.
Right.
And I think we did the same thing. Justin and I were like, oh, we're expats. And it was not too long ago that we like had to have this conversation. We were like, we've been referring to ourselves as like a full-time travel family, but we've also been saying nomadic. But we've also been saying expat. Never in the conversation did immigrant pop up. Right. And I'm like, oh, well, obviously that's because we haven't decided to settle anywhere. Right. And he's like, yeah, but like, isn't it funny how? And we kind of went down the rabbit hole. And I'm like, you know what? As we move forward, we just have to be conscious of the things that we say and the way that we think about this stuff. Because the last thing that I want to do, we've been traveling long enough and for long enough now that like we're starting to see the things. You know what I mean? Like past that little veil. And I'm like, the last thing that I want to do is go somewhere and make a mini, American microcosm there. That's the last thing I want to do. And like you said, especially when you touch down, seeing people that look like you, who you can share culture with,
right.
And, they eat the same stuff as you and speak the same language as you, you can tell stories of, back home or whatever. Like, yes, it helps ease that process. But also, if you're going to be somewhere, especially long term, you can't live in that bubble. You're missing out on so much as far as food, culture, experience, lifestyle, all of the things.
And if I can just jump in for a second.
Please.
So I just got kicked out of a WhatsApp group like 2 weeks ago, right?
Oh, I love it.
Right.
I love
the spice of it all.
I know.
I've been kicked out of better groups, but yes, I was kicked out. And it was funny to me that this became an uncomfortable like conversation for so many people, because, like you said, nomads, expats, and immigrants, right? Why should having that conversation be so uncomfortable for so many people? And I realized a lot of people were just like, I'm not an immigrant. I'm like, but you've been here for 7 years, Otis. Otis was not the person's real name, but it just slid off the tongue so easy, Otis. But anyway, it started in a group, and I'm not going to go too much into details, but it started in a group where it was made for women of color living in Mexico, right? Specifically in Playa. And a Mexican person posted like a flyer, right, about an event. And she was very clear. She said, please come out. This is a good opportunity for language exchange. Locals get a 50% discount. Residents, and what did she say? Residents and immigrants, they get 20%, and that was it. And I mean, I thought that was good. Me being a resident, of course, I'm like, But even if she had just left it at locals 50%, it would have still been fine.
Yeah.
And sidebar, I know we're so used to Karens being white people, but I have learned in other countries there are Karens, Black Karens. I don't know if they're Karenishas. I don't know what to call them, but they are out here. And they are running rampant. So
all skin folk and kin folk. All skin folk and kin folk.
So there was a Karenisha who inserted herself into this conversation and said, that's a shame that Black people as a whole are not getting a discount. Why are locals and residents and immigrants only getting discounts? Which, off the bat, I'm like, well, ma'am, we all know you run a business and you're being upset at residents getting it, which means that you're probably running your business illegally. So this is not a conversation you should even want to have in a group. Right? That's when she said that, I'm like, yeah. So she goes on, and it bothered me because then the conversation became like immigrants versus expats, and it was just like a whole big thing. And Black people should be appreciated more, which I agree, we should be. But in this conversation, it had nothing to do with color. And then I also noticed how when foreigners often express their grievances, it really upsets me that even locals try to make them feel better about themselves. It really, at first, I was just like, Karina, this is not your fight. Take your 20% discount and mind your business. But the more I saw people like stroking this Karenisha's like ego and making her feel like a victim when she had just jumped down the throat of a local person who was sharing her country with you, number one. Number two, who hasn't used the hotline to get you deported with your illegal business yet. Like, let's call a spade. And the fact, this is not just an isolated situation. I've noticed how people always feel like they have to make Americans and Canadians feel much better about themselves. And I'm speaking about Americans and Canadians because I don't pay attention to Europeans and what they got going on because I'm not from there. So I just be like, y'all do you over there. If you say something to a local, then I'm gonna just say what I gotta say, but I don't really know about y'all like that.
Yeah.
So it's sad that people always feel like they have to make us feel better. Because in that moment, this girl innocently tried to include everyone.
Because she didn't have to give the discount.
She did not.
To residents anyway. This could have very much been locals only.
She wanted to include us. And there are so many people who want to learn the language. So the fact that you're offering this event where people can exchange languages and get to know each other from and network and connect, I thought it was great. So I sat there for about 30 minutes and I said, Karina, I'm not going to say nothing. And then Karina said, And when I went off, I called her a colonizer. I said, it's so, I said, it is sad that we're so accustomed to calling, Anglo-Saxons colonizers. But there are so many Americans who come to these countries with a colonizing spirit. And I get that you come here to build community. But at the end of the day, that does not mean that you have the right to look down on other people. The fact that so many people jump to, it's about race. It's about, the fact that I don't have my papers yet and I'm not an immigrant or a resident, instead of thinking, I am an American citizen. I am someone from Canada. I'm probably getting paid in my own currency, which is going to stretch further than someone who's getting paid in pesos. The fact that didn't even cross your mind, the first thing you went into was, well, I know I'm not a resident, but that's unfair. I know that, Black people should be more, appreciated. The fact that you didn't understand that, you didn't think about money, you just thought about race, like that really ticks me off. And so that is one of my biggest problems is when we come to other countries and we're looking for, I love that people look for people who look like them, right? Mm-hmm. There is something great about being able to just say something and people already know. Like, if I say something about the chair in Alabama, Black people at this point are like, August 5th, girl.
Our new national holiday.
Right. They know, right? That is something special about that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think if we're going to travel, then we should make it our responsibility to try to connect with other people. And I don't want to say people do it intentionally, but there's a lot of people who come and they're so entitled. And entitlement looks different to, different people. I see people who come in and they're like, oh, well, they don't speak, they're not speaking English. Or they're like, oh, well, I don't like the way this looks in here. I had one girl one time who, she wasn't talking to me, but she was at a table nearby, and she's like, the way they smell when I come in there, and I'm like,
man.
and
yeah, there's a lot of that.
Right.
And you know what? I'll be the first to say, I've been guilty of this.
Of course.
I've been guilty of going places and having complaints that reek of entitlement. I've been guilty. I've been guilty of walking into a room and immediately my nose turns up. I've been guilty of it. I think, especially you first start traveling, you don't think of things, we all kind of have like some gut instincts and reflexes. And that's one of the good things I think travel just takes out of you.
Right.
I remember the first time I went to Amsterdam, the shower was so small. The water smelled funny. The hotel didn't have any washcloths. And this was the first time in my life I had been in a hotel room that did not have washcloths.
Right.
I'm confused. What are y'all? Right, I went down that whole rabbit hole, and I was with people from school, and they kind of like helped me just like work through that or whatever. But I think it's something we carry, and I love what you touch on. Even this WhatsApp situation, and a lot of what happens when we isolate, even though we're abroad. There's a lot of baggage I feel like I've had to unpack around being Black and not in the U.S. And there's so much intersectionality that I feel like, again, I've had to unpack being abroad.
Right.
There's a whole thing I've heard my whole life, right? People hate Americans. They hate Americans. They hate Americans. They hate Americans, right? And in my head, I'm not American. But I'm not like American.
I travel. I'll be out here.
I'm like, I'm not, dang. But then I go abroad and I have to realize I'm Black. I'm a Black woman. I like to think I'm pretty cultured or respectful. I'm still American.
Right.
I still have USD. I still have passport privilege.
Right.
Like, all of these things still apply to me, even though when I'm sat home in the US, those things don't carry the same weight that they do outside.
Right.
So I love this notion of like, we've got to have more perspective when we travel about where we fit, not in our home country, not in our hometown, but in like the world as a whole.
Right.
And I'm curious how you've navigated that. I've seen different people approach it different ways. I don't think I've seen the conversation really had though, because there's a lot of just like having to unpack Blackness as you travel and move through the world. Because it means different things in different places.
Right. So I think I always say it makes me it saddens me that there are so many Black people who don't know what it feels like to be Black outside of the United States. And it's sad because we take a lot of the trauma that we've had to endure as being Black Americans, and then we just bring it with us. And I had to learn that, right? I remember the first time, and I think this was when I was in Thailand, and the lady was just following me around, and I'm like, it's because I'm Black. I don't want to steal. And I mean, I'm automatically like, girl, don't nobody want to steal nothing here. I'm trying to help you. Like in my head, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I just happened to say this in one of the Facebook groups, and thank heavens I decided to message a girl privately. I was just like, she looks like she wouldn't be rude to me. And I messaged her and I'm like, I'm noticing that sometimes they follow me around in the stores, like they think I'm gonna steal something. And I think it's just so, it's so sad and they're racist here. And she's like, the reason most times, and this is not for everyone, right? Because some people might think you're trying to steal something, I don't know. But she's like, most times the reason why they're following you around is because you're American and they know you have money. And so they want to, and I mean, she had a bag, everything. She was like, you want, and then when I start thinking that way, and it doesn't mean it's always what's happening. Sometimes they might think, oh, this girl's trying to steal something. But when I start having that mindset of, oh, they think I want to, I want to purchase. Then I started realizing like, it was less of like a moment of me just being offended and more just me being like, okay, they think I got money. I'm broke. But I love that for me, that you think I got money. Right. And then it just starts to change. And then I also think like, as we're exploring, sometimes we have to remember things don't always be great, but we have to go back to how we were raised. So there are times where I might eat something and I'm like, oh, girl, this was not what I thought it was going to be. But the whole how I handle those situations, not only does it change the way people might perceive me, but how people may perceive other African Americans. Because at the end of the day, there are situations as we're traveling where you might be the only black person they've encountered outside of them seeing Nicki Minaj twerking on Instagram. You know, I've had my share of I love big booty black women and men asking me, can I dance for them? Right?
Oh, very bold. All right.
I've had my share of them. But I always go back to, like, how would my grandmother feel if she was sitting right here and I didn't like something? If I were to just spit it in a napkin and complain and do all of this because I didn't like something, my grandmother would probably slap me in my face.
Right.
I don't condone you slapping people in the face, but that's what my grandmother, right. But my grandmother probably would. And so I think even in learning and exposing ourselves to different cultures, we have to still keep that mindset. Every action does not call for a reaction. And I think, and I'm just going to focus right now on, I don't even want to just focus on Black Americans, Americans as a whole. And I always say Americans because I'm American.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's easier to talk about your own folk, right? Yeah. I've noticed how Americans, even when things are not going their way, when we come here, and I've been in a situation before where I almost ended up in Chinese jail. But it was in self-defense. But it still was the thought of, like, well, you did something to me, so now here's that.
Lick back. Okay.
Right. Let me get my lick back. And then you realize you getting your lick back ends you in a Chinese jail where, honey, you don't want to be there. And so now when things happen, it's that quick thought of, like, okay, Karina, is it worth it? It's not. And it's usually not, because most times I can remove myself from a situation. Right. But that came with me traveling and realizing a lot of it is rooted in ego. A lot of it is rooted in pride. We're so used to, oh, you're not going to talk to me like that. And then we go to another country and it's like, you're not going to follow me around the store because I'll buy this whole thing out. Knocking over shelf. No. Or, I don't like this. Send it back. It's funny, but I always say, like, I'm so lenient when I'm in other countries.
I am too. And sometimes I'm like, should I be? But then I'm just like,
But I am. Because if a fly lands on my food in Subway in South Carolina, send it back.
It's a problem.
A fly lands on my food here, I'm just going to shoot away and keep on eating. I'm not even going to hold you. And if he stay on there long enough, I'm going to tell you what a fly tastes like. So it's that, like, things won't always be pretty, but sometimes we have to learn to be a little flexible. And I mean, in all things, whether it's small things like water. There are people who complain, like, water in other countries, it's not boiling hot. And I'm like, well, baby, it's not going to always be peaches and cream.
True. The water here wasn't cold like 2 weeks ago. This is the first time in my life the water was all the way turned down cold. It was coming out hot.
Like scalding hot.
Why is this happening?
Oh, girl, you better count your blessings. I turned it back
the other way. I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not righty-tighty. Maybe it's lefty-loosey. It's still hot. I'm like, babe, it's broken. He's like, it's just hot outside. And I'm like, there's not a mechanism they have that, like, makes it cold. I need it to be cold right now.
Right.
And again, it's another moment of just like, okay, let me pause. Let me back up. Everything isn't always going to be the way that I anticipate.
Right.
The way that I desire or the way that I'm comfortable with.
Right.
At least I didn't burn myself.
Right. And it also shapes how you or who you choose to travel with. And let's shift that because I'm actually
speak on it.
Because I'm actually going on a trip with my best friend's probably gonna watch this, but I'm going on a trip with my best friend and I love her dearly.
We love you, bestie.
And I'm gonna call her Sherry because that's not her real name. Sherry is like Otis. There we go. So Sherry is my best friend. She's been my best friend for over a decade, and we were travel partners domestically from the moment I met her. We've gone to Vegas, Arizona. We've done so much in the States. It wasn't until we traveled abroad that I realized I don't really like you as a traveler. And it's because I realized, and it's not just her, of course, but we're so used to these quote unquote luxuries in the States. And when we don't get them in other countries, sometimes we don't react in the best way. Or even simple things like we had an argument. Actually, this happened in 2021. We had an argument about it last week because I sent her like this little rough PowerPoint presentation on like, you will not embarrass me out here in these streets when we get to Spain, Italy, and France. Because I had some bad experiences in France, but I don't think it was because I was Black. I think it's because I was American, and they were like, girl, stop with the wee and really learn some French, which is fair enough. I'm in your country. I'm in your country. So even when they say things like that, I'm like, fair enough. I should have tried something. I should have wrote some things on my hand. Google Translate is there. Should have. So I'm giving her like play by play. You're not going to embarrass me out here in these streets. And she's like, I've never done any of that. Made me realize red flag number one is that there are times where we're so accustomed to acting a certain way that we, as Americans, we just think it's the normal thing. Like, you didn't do this, so it's okay for me to get mad. You didn't bring my food out hot enough, just as an example. You didn't bring my food out hot enough, so it's okay for me to just storm out. And that's not always the best way to handle situations. But in a specific situation, we were in Kenya, and we were in an area where there were a lot of like Muslim individuals, right? A lot of Muslims. And the first thing she says out loud is, and I don't know, you can decide if you want to cut this part out or not, but the first thing she says is, wow, a lot of these people, they don't wear deodorant. I'm like, see, baby, if you had taken the time to read the itinerary I sent you, not only do I label like the activities in the restaurants, I'm talking about like religion and how we need to carry ourselves. We had an issue too in Tanzania where one of my international husbands.
I have a question.
Oh, girl, get into it.
I have a question. I'm gonna let you finish.
Oh yeah. And then we can talk about my international husband.
I have one, but I'm like,
girl, go for it.
Let me not say anything too toxic. Okay.
So, my international husband, right? Oh, he's gonna edit the whole thing. And this is Karina. Thanks for coming to my. It's gonna be the end of it. This is Karina. She's a traveler. All right. Thank you so much, Karina, for coming. And so my international husband, we're in Zanzibar. We're going to pick her up from the hotel, and she's wearing a bikini. We're not even going to the beach. We're going to his mama's house because she's going to cook us some palau. And you having a bikini and a see-through dress. And I'm like,